Keeper of the Lost Cities, Exile, Chapter 23. Down, down, down they climbed, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. No light except from the balefire crystals around their necks. No sound except their feet slapping against stone. Stomp, stomp, stomp. For a while Sophie tried to count the stairs, but she gave up once they'd passed 1,000. Her legs burned and her feet ached, and the air grew hotter and stuffier the farther they went, until her hair was plastered to her head with sweat. "Where is this place?" she asked. "The center of the earth?" "Exactly." "You're serious?" "I'm guessing humans taught you the Earth's core was either a big pool of magma or a solid ball as hot as the sun." That was what she'd been taught, but she wasn't about to admit it. "But how is this possible? The dwarves can tunnel anywhere, and we can make anything happen, anything habitable. Combine that with the fact that exile needed to be impossible to reach, and this was really the only logical option. Only elves would call tunneling to the center of the earth logical, and only a girl raised by humans would think otherwise. She couldn't decide if he meant that as a good thing or a bad thing. "So, can you tell me what we're doing here yet? Or are you still worried about eavesdroppers?" "No, I think this is sufficiently secluded." She'd taken at least 10 more steps before he added, "The council has ordered me to perform the memory break on Finton." "Oh." She tried to say more, but the words lodged in her throat, making it hard to breathe. "He still refuses to reveal what he's hiding, and we're positive he knows something important about the Everblaze." Alden's voice was hushed, but it echoed through the suffocating silence of the dark stairway. "I've been ordered to give him one last opportunity to confess. If he remains silent, I'm to probe his memories by any means necessary." "Have you ever done a memory break before?" Sophie whispered. She didn't know much about them, only that they shattered the person's sanity. "Not personally, they are quite rare. Quinlan performed the last one since he's a stronger probe than me." "You mean the one on Prentice?" Sophie interrupted. "Unfortunately, yes." The sadness in his tone made the question she'd been afraid to ask slip out before she could stop it. "Do you think breaking Prentice's mind was a mistake?" Alden finished when she didn't. She nodded. "If the Black Swan really were the good guys, then Prentice had technically been innocent. He did hide something from the council, but he was hiding her, probably trying to protect her from the real bad guys." "I try very hard not to think about it," Alden said quietly. Sophie had been trying to do the same thing. "So why did you bring me here?" she asked after several steps of silence. Hopefully he didn't need her to officially accuse Finton. She firmly believed that Finton had been involved with the Everblaze somehow, but she wasn't sure if she could stare into his eyes and condemn him to the madness. Alden cleared his throat. "A memory break should never be performed alone. You must send your consciousness so deeply into the victims that it's possible you could get lost in the mental chaos and never return. The only way to protect yourself is to have someone there to guide you back." She stopped so abruptly, Alden crashed into her. "Please tell me you aren't expecting me to be your guide." "I understand your hesitation, Sophie. I've wrestled with the idea myself ever since you showed me that charm." She whipped around to face him. "That's what you think the clue means?" "I do. The Black Swan would never use the word guide by coincidence, especially mere days before the council ordered a memory break. The first one ever ordered on an ancient mind. So I can only assume that they are telling us to have you guide me, probably to make sure we're able to unearth whatever he's hiding before he shatters. That will be much more difficult with thousands of years worth of memories to wade through." "But that doesn't make sense. If If I'm the guide, then what do they mean about the past? I'm guessing that's referring to the fact that Finton is one of the ancients and therefore the very essence of our past. Or perhaps they are hinting that the memory we need is deep in Finton's past. But I realize that it's not a perfect match, Sophie. And believe me, I've done everything I could to reject this theory. I've researched guide and compasses and spent every waking hour trying to find some other meaning. This is the only idea that makes sense. What about Prentice? Alden looked away, shaking his head as he ran a hand through his hair. How many times do I have to tell you, Sophie? Prentice is useless. The emotion in his voice knocked her back a step, but she couldn't tell what it was. Sorrow? Anger? I'm sorry, he said after a second, rubbing his temples. I wish I could change, but I can't. He sounded so incredibly weary. Before Sophie could think of anything to say, he took a shaky breath and added, I'm not going to force this on you, Sophie. I had to bring you down here because I couldn't tell you the plan until we were completely alone. But if you don't want to do this, we will leave right now. No questions, no problems. Certainly no hard feelings. I'll come back with someone else as my guide. The choice is completely yours. He held out the Magdalene crystal. Say the word and I'll take you home. Her reflection looked fractured in the dark facets. Sophie felt just a stone. What if something happens to you? She whispered, wishing she could block the horrifying thoughts racing through her head. Alden stared at her with wild eyes, like Brand, curled up on the floor of a cold, empty house, rocking back and forth. Nothing's going to go wrong, Alden promised. How can you know that? You wouldn't need a guide unless there was a really good chance something could go wrong during the break, right? And what if I'm not strong enough to help you? Alden stepped closer and squeezed her shoulders. I've no doubt that you're strong enough, Sophie. Think of all the amazing things your mind can do. You're impenetrable to others' thoughts and transmissions, not fits. Okay, one person can get past you. Sylvie too. A smile peeked from the corner of his lips. Fine. One person and an Alicon. That's still far superior to the strongest keeper, who's had dozens of telepaths slip through. And you pair that with your incredible concentration levels and consider the fact that no one can block you. It's almost like the Black Swan made you for this task. Sophie cringed. She didn't want to be made for anything. I know how frightening this is, and trust me, this is the last thing I would ever ask of you. Not because I'm worried for me. I know I'll be fine, but I want you to be fine. If you don't want to, say the word. It's not that I don't want to, it's just something happened and it wasn't my fault. Nothing is going to happen, I promise. But even if it does, it wouldn't be your fault. No, don't shake your head. Listen to me. You are, by far, the strongest telepath in the world. If you can't guide me back, no one can. No one. She could tell from his eyes that he meant every word, and if he believed in her that much, she swallowed, barely able to find enough of her voice to whisper, Okay. His smile was sad as he pulled in her pulled her in for a hug. Thank you, Sophie. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. She was too stunned by what she'd just agreed to do to think of anything to say to that. So she turned back around and continued the descent. The rest of the walk was a blur as she tried to remember everything Tegan had ever taught her in the telepathy sessions. It all seemed so trite and useless now. What did it matter that she could project her thoughts on paper or read the minds of animals or transmit miles and miles away? How would any of that pull Alden back if he started to lose himself? She was so absorbed in her own worries that she didn't notice they'd reached the bottom until she tripped, her feet expecting another stair and finding sandy floor instead. The room they'd entered was small, square, and empty. The only distinct feature was a huge metal door with a small black slit in the center. "They call this place the room where chances are lost," Alden whispered. The sand rustled in front of them, and Sophie barely managed not to squeal as another dwarf twisted out of the ground. "Permission has been granted for you to enter," the screamed creature muttered in a dry, cracked voice, as he shook the loose grains from his shaggy fur and squinted at them with his dark, beady eyes. "I'm Krikor. I shall be your attendant." Alden gave a slight bow, and Sophie fumbled to copy him. "Are you ready?" Krikor asked, moving toward the metal door. Alden reached for Sophie's hand, probably to reassure her, but he was trembling so much it was hard to feel comforted. "As ready as we'll ever be," Alden whispered. Then he pulled Sophie forward and inserted his Magician pendant into the keyhole in the center of the door. Metal latches clicked, but nothing happened until Krikor slipped around a disc of Maxidian into a thin slot hidden in the shadows of the edge of the door, like putting a coin in a soda machine. A thunderous boom reverberated through the chamber, and a seal broke along the edges, letting bright orange light seep through the cracks. "Focus on the floor as you walk," Krikor advised as he pushed open the door. "It will spare you from seeing the madness." The first thing Sophie noticed was the smell. It wasn't rot or decay or waste like she would expect from a prison, nor was it sulfur or magma like the center of the earth should smell. The only word she could think to describe it was bleak. If hopelessness had an odor, it would smell like exile, sharp and stale and bitter. Also noticeable was the sound. It wasn't loud or angry, no screaming or raging, just constant, muffled moans, cries of misery, of insanity. "How big is this place?" Sophie asked, her voice echoing off the cavernous walls. The metal hallways was lined with porthole-sized windows and seamless doors, and it curved up ahead, disappearing into the gloomy light. "Not as big as you think," Alden told her as they made their way down the hall. "The structure is a spiral, curling in on itself." Still, there were a lot of doors. "I thought crime was supposed to be rare." "Exile is the prison for all the worlds. That is why we have to keep its location so secret. Not all species are as peaceful as ours." Almost on cue, some sort of creature screeched and crashed against the wall of its cell. Sophie moved closer to Alden. Despite her fears, she ignored Krikov's warning, scanning the doors and hoping to spot Prentice's name in the glowing labels above them. But then a face appeared in one of the windows, moss green skin and slits for a nose, and brown fangs peeking through its flat lips. Sophie looked away. She could feel it staring at her with its bulging milky eyes as they passed. After that, she focused on the smooth, fertile floor, watching her reflection warp and skew as she tried not to imagine what other monsters hid behind the metal walls. On and on they walked, until Sophie felt dizzy from winding round and round and round, and yet it still felt too soon when they stopped, and Cricker announced, "The prisoner you seek is in here."